Yeah, in your piece, Bitcoin and the Rhythms of History, you take that, you break it down into different generations are in charge at different times, and then the next, which generation is in waiting, etc. And you build the whole story up like this. And that's, I think, what makes that piece so fascinating. It's gotten a lot of circulation, your piece. What's been you talked a little bit about what people have reacted to it and asked you questions about it. What's the overall feeling about that you've gotten, the feedback you've gotten to the piece? It's going into a community of Bitcoiners primarily. They are coming in from all different fields, all different schools and things. What's been the reaction, and has it surprised you at all? What's been the most surprising reaction you've gotten since this piece went out? Because it has circulated quite widely.
Yeah, definitely. So initial feedback was very positive. I've gotten hundreds of messages saying it was the most mind-blowing thing they've ever read. That's one cohort. Now you also have a cohort that says, I fundamentally reject these cycles because you can't make such broad sweeping generalizations. And usually the premise of that argument, at least my assessment of the argument, is that number one, technology is too powerful. And so they would rate technology as a stronger driver than these human archetypal generational cycles. That's one. And the other one is, well, my big brain says that this time is different and every time is different throughout history. And so I would say there's those two camps. And to the technology people who think that technology is more powerful, that's a reasonable approach, but I think there's another angle here, which is that the mood at the time determines what demand there is for technology, and that demand through this mood is observed by entrepreneurs, which leads to technology in the future. And so they're coming at it from two different ways. I don't think either direction, either technology, economics versus generations, I don't think either one's perfect, but I think it's important to realize that these cycles are very deep. They produce a mood, which then gets produced into the future. And one concrete example would be Facebook. This is a millennial-driven phenomenon. Gen X would probably find Facebook in its early days to be completely insane as the individualistic generation. Millennials are like, we're all the same, no problem, let's put everything on the internet. And so that is very much a millennial-driven change. And if you didn't have millennials driving the Facebooks of the world, maybe we wouldn't have produced those in the first place because there wouldn't have been a demand for it. I hope that makes sense.
Right. We come back to 2008 because that was the financial crisis. That's when Bitcoin was born. That's also, that financial crisis was the first election that millennials really participated in. And they came out in force for Obama. And Obama, interestingly, Matt Stoller, who does amazing work on anti-monopoly stuff, he said this was the equivalent of during the Great Depression, when the people basically in 2008 chose Herbert Hoover over FDR. So they made the bad choice. They made the choice of Obama, who was an amazing orator, like historic in terms of how amazing he was as at public speaking. But he chose the corrupt banking system. He chose not to burn it down. He chose to keep it propped up beyond what it was. So I mean, a lot of these fourth turnings end in just all out physical war of people killing each other. But in a way, that was a choice of a financial class war that he chose and that we're still going through. Look at the opioid overdoses in America. We look at the decline in the mortality rate. I mean, the fact that the mortality rate is going down, that the first time in peacetime in America suggests actually maybe it is wartime. So maybe there has been a different sort of war.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to bring up Obama here. And Obama was, again, in 2008, that's the transition period between third and fourth. And what we see in fourth turnings is civic engagement skyrocketing as the millennials, the hero archetype, come of age and start voting, like you mentioned. However, Obama was sort of a transition president. He had 1 foot in the third turning and 1 foot in the fourth turning. And an interesting parallel between the two is in the third turning, politicians hide all the problems and they say, no problem, it's not a big deal. They minimize them. And that's simply because there's no demand for change in the third turning. Now in the fourth turning, people all of a sudden realize, probably spurred by the global financial crisis, that holy shit, we really need some change. And so then what you see is politicians weaponizing the fact that there's a demand for change, and they come up with slogans like hope and change, make America great again, drain the swamp. Those are all pushing on that pain and saying, look, I'm the guy to make the change. And so that's a really interesting analogy. And Obama certainly said one thing and did another. And that's pretty frustrating to see. And now that we're in sort of the peak of the fourth turning, historically what we need is a, quote, gray champion. This is someone who's a little bit older. They are molded by the situation. It's someone you might not expect. FDR was this person in the 30s, whether or not we want to criticize him. But he's something that young people rally around and has tremendous popular support. So his election in 32, it was the most popular vote of all time. And so that's sort of the sign. And I don't see that with Joe Biden, and I don't see that with Trump. And so from a political standpoint, I'm not sure who our great champion's going to be. That's sort of one of the down-facing cards we've yet to flip over in this fourth turning.
Right. I mean, you could argue that it would have been Bernie Sanders, but through a lot of questionable machinations in the political circles, he did not take his place. So it's been the cyclical, the grand cycle has been thwarted, and the results, could be a derailment, I guess. I mean, that's part of the fourth turning, is that the thing comes off the rails, and there's no, and you have this horrible historical moment. And maybe looking back, they'll say, well, had that not been the case, and there was this guy had got through, this was when history wasn't served, and we ended up with this terrific thing, and it was either part of the turnings or, it's fascinating stuff. So anyway, I mean, I'm going to read it again. I've read the whole thing twice now. I'll probably read it, every few months. I'll return to it just to know where I am, because otherwise I'd be totally lost.
Well, thanks so much for being on here. This was really, again, we like mind-blowing conversation to expand our minds, prepping us for this burning down, the combustion of the old system, because there's no use holding on to it. It's over. It's gone. The dark ages are over. Enlightenment is here.